All right, everyone. Welcome. Today we're going to have a really good conversation about mindset today, which is timely for so many reasons. But more importantly, I am going to pass this over to Jenna because I've learned so much from her and continue to learn from her. So Emma and I will pipe in, but we're going to let Jenna really lead us through today.
Yay. So we kind of talked about mindset in a very short piece when we did the wellness and mindset section that I covered the last time. And so this is kind of just an extension of that. Some of it will be a little bit of repeat, and then some of it I'm going to show you guys some little tricks to go through. And really the crux of mindset is trying to be present and being in where you are right now. There's a few different books that really kind of explain mindset. And one of the things is if you're anxious, you are living in the future. If you're depressed, you're living in the past. And so one of the biggest pieces of advice for mindset is really just trying to be where you are right now. And this applies obviously to golf. We talk about this a lot. And sometimes you just got to be in the current swing, in that current shot, and try to do your best and not being in the future or the past of what shot you might have just shanked to the left or right, and not worrying about the next putt coming up. So if you guys are having questions, please feel free to interrupt me because this is going to be a little bit more of a conversation piece. But go to the next page. Thank you. I found this quote from Albert Einstein, and I really just love it because I think a lot of the times we get stuck in mindset and we, have these problems that arise. And sometimes we just really have to completely shift the way we think about things in order to get out of that problem. This is the same kind of concept as, you can't get this different results from the same thing you've always done. The definition of insanity, all of those things, they're all controlled by your mind. And so if we can try to think about problems or challenges that arise in our day and really just try to think about what the best mindset for that will be, it will really try to help us get through them and move on to the next part of our journey.
Jenna, that makes me think of the great philosopher, Dr. Phil. Um,
I always know when you're going to say the great philosopher. I know what's coming next.
Yeah, he's a lunatic. But I do love when he says, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And that's true. When we're trying to fix things or when we're trying to do things, if we just keep doing it, I mean, that's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the really great piece about that is when you think about all that we've talked about through all of our trainings is this is where diversity comes in, right? Diversity of thought is one of the biggest pieces to making sure that you can have a growth mindset. Because if you don't have somebody else to give you a different perspective, you're not going to be able to switch your mindset. And so having an advisory board of people who are really there to help you see a different perspective is a huge hack for having a growth mindset, and really being willing to talk about that. So we kind of looked at this graphic before, but I wanted to include it again because I really think it helps you to frame and understand the way that a fixed mindset and a growth mindset might think differently. In the first one we did, we talked about how I had to change my own mindset about my fixed mindset around creativity for me. And I used Emma as an example because this is something that Emma is a creative person. That's just more of who she is. But one thing that Emma laughs at is I tell myself I'm not creative, and that is a fixed mindset. What it really should say is that I have not spent as much time learning and growing the skills that are around a creative mindset. And so viewing challenges as opportunities, acknowledging and embracing your weaknesses, thinking as learning as brain training is one of my favorite little pieces over here, because it really is. Neuroplasticity is how you grow the neural connections in your brain. And they have data that shows that you can create new connections through neurons up into your 90s. There is no stop of growth. This is the only part of your body that doesn't stop growing when you're, in your 20s and 30s, so long as you continue to challenge yourself. Your brain is really kind of one of those places where if you don't use it, you lose it, becomes very apparent. And a lot of science around Alzheimer's actually shows that that's one of the reasons that people experience cognitive decline, especially in Western culture, because we don't, after retirement, there's no challenge. There's no trying to learn a new skill. It's, people sit in a nursing home sometimes, and then you put them in a nursing home and maybe they really start to decline. It's because there's no challenge involved. Nerd moment. There's a new series on Netflix that talks about the blue zones. And it's called like Living to 100 or something like that. I can't remember the exact title of it. But they really focus on the things that these blue zones do, which are locations that have people who live past 100 a lot. Like they have many. And I just finished watching one from Japan, and Japan is one of the places that they really find people who live a very long time, mostly because they interact with other people and continue to learn for their whole life, which is a really cool thought process.
Yeah. And Jenna, this is where I love to talk about too, like, and I can geek out with the Alzheimer's research as well. But it's our brain, as long as we can help it create new pathways, we will continue it will continue to be healthier. And so I always remind people, like, when we leave the house and we're like, oh, did we close the garage door? Did we turn off the curling iron? How did we get here? Did we stop at that stop sign? If we go the same way all the time, our brain creates these grooves that just get stuck, and we just keep doing the same things, and then it becomes second nature to us. And so I encourage people, like, go different ways to work or to places that you go all the time. Find different ways to expand that. And then Jenna, to go to your initial point about the creativity piece with you, it's the same on the golf course from all of us.
Yeah.
When I take ladies out for a mentor round, the first thing I will do when they're getting frustrated is take a deep breath and say, I can. And I know that's like, oh, okay, here we go. But so often whether it be on the golf course or whether it be in business, it's that stupid voice in our head that's telling us we can't, that makes it so we don't.
Yeah. And I think with growth mindset, especially when you talk about golf or anything that's outward facing, you have to think of it as the opportunity to be a beginner. And I've said this to Emma a few times when we were at lessons, just like, I just have to embrace that I'm not good at something and it's okay. And this is an opportunity for me to be a beginner, which we don't get very often in our lives. And understanding that the language, which we talked about in the last session that we kind of briefly touched on mindset, is very important. And so I'm not good at this yet, right? Like that's the language that comes in because I haven't put enough hours in. And there's a lot of research about 10,000 hours being what it takes to actually be like a professional and a master at something. That's a lot of time. And it can be very frustrating for those 999,000 hours until you get to the 10,000th. But you really just gotta be okay with not being perfect. And that's one of the hardest pieces, right? Is being okay with the failure, not being good at something when you're used to it, and just understanding that your brain is still learning and it'll get there eventually, as long as you keep trying.
Mhm.
So this is a copy of a slide from the first one that we did, where we just kind of talked about kind of the overview of how to adopt a growth mindset. One of the things that we talked about is we all do a ton of stuff that we don't give ourselves credit for. And so when you start thinking about how do I make sure that my brain can do more, a list of accomplishments is a really big piece to this, of like, you know what? All the hard things that I was like, man, this is going to kill me. You've made it through. You've overcome things. You've done better at this than you give yourself credit for. And the problem is, we're going to talk about this here in a little bit, is that our brains focus on negativity. And so the negative hard things stick out more than the accomplishments do. So if we can help ourselves to, do a review of the list of all of the stuff that we got done in a week, in a month, in a year, can really help to foster a growth mindset.
And by the way, don't beat yourself up about the fact that your brain focuses on the negative things. That's literally how it's wired.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, hey, we should probably keep you alive. So the negative things we're going to make really stick out.
Yes.
So then language, we just talked about kind of making sure that you're using the correct language, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more. Labeling emotions is very helpful when it comes to a growth mindset, because you can be angry, but if you're angry, you might actually, anger is typically a umbrella emotion. And so figuring out why you're angry is actually very helpful to understand, like, okay, am I angry because I'm actually ashamed? Am I angry because I'm actually, worried that I'm not going to fit it? Like, what below emotion is really driving that anger or other emotions? And
That
then,
sounds so simple, by the way, but so many people don't do it, and so many people can't do it.
yeah,
I mean, I've one of my friends went to like couples therapy with a guy she was with, and they got to the therapist, and the therapist said, how are you feeling?" to the man, and the man just looked at him and he goes, "Bad." And he couldn't come up with anything more specific than bad, because he couldn't put a name. But I mean, name it to tame it is, is what you have to do. But for
yeah.
some people, that is extremely difficult.
Yeah, it really is. And we are going to go ahead and add a shot count because I'm going to say the word.
I knew
But
it.
Brene Brown, that her book, Atlas of the Heart, is really one of the most beneficial books. Even somebody who's completely aware of emotions, there's 87 emotions that she labeled in there, and having the actual definitions of them is absolutely changing. It changes the way that your brain functions, because once you know a definition of something and you can see it and revisit it, you can go through and be like, okay, am I experiencing jealousy or is this envy? And knowing the difference between those two is that envy is saying, I want what you have and I'll do whatever it takes to get it so that you don't have it either. But jealousy is, I want what you have. So knowing the difference between those two, you're like, oh, I'm not going to use the word envy anymore, because that means that I'm not very nice inside. Like it's really just understanding the labels, and it makes a big difference. So, okay, so we're going to dive into now the bigger mindset piece. And this is the overall understanding of how mindset works, right? Your thoughts become your feelings, and your feelings become actions, and your actions turn into results. So if you are ever like, okay, I need to figure out how to, reverse this or do something, think about it in this track so that you can understand that whatever's in your brain is going to create the results you want. So the real steps to identifying a growth mindset and creating a growth mindset is, one, identifying your thoughts. Like we just said, are your thoughts positive or negative? And do your current thoughts support the results I want in my life? Can current results be traced back to a thought? If they're negative, what can I think instead? How do I want to feel? And I also added in, like, how does someone that I admire think? I think we all, have, whether it be a celebrity or a person that's a mentor in our life that we value, we really see that they behave in some way. And I think sometimes we give those people a little bit more grace than we give to ourselves. We think, oh, she's just got it all together. This is how her brain works. She speaks so kindly to herself. So if that's something that you have in your head, use it. Think about, how would Blake Lively talk to herself? You've got to really think about embodying that version of you so that you have something to aspire to. So the first step for a growth mindset is identifying your thoughts. This is also where meditation comes in, which we talked about a little bit, because this isn't judgment of your thoughts. This isn't, telling yourself to stop or change. This is literally just saying, like, oh, you know what? That was a negative thought. That was a positive thought. That was just kind of in the middle, and understanding how you talk to yourself so that you can change it enough to rewire it. It's essentially like an athlete watching film, so they see what they're doing from a different perspective. The next one is to let go of the past. My 90s people, I had to, this is one of the funniest parts of The Lion King, and he smacks him on the head and he says, ow, what'd you do that for? And he's like, doesn't matter, it's in the past. And so we've really got to find a way to let go of the past. We can't change it. And if we harp on it, that's one of the places that I used to struggle with a lot. I'm somebody who will replay things in my head 17 times of things I should have done differently, or I could have done better, or I could have this or that, or edited. You got to let it go. You got to let it go and you got to live in the now, so that you can really start to figure out what's next. And just like Rafiki says, you can either run from it or learn from it. I personally don't like running.
Well, and for me with this, like, it doesn't mean that things aren't hard. It doesn't mean that, we don't feel bad for, a minute or two or a day or two, depending on the, altitude or the elevation, what happened. When I've been fired a couple times in my life, and when I've gotten fired, it's like, okay, the shock and the sadness and the shame and the anger and the every other emotion that I could feel. And then saddle up and move on. And it's like, what lessons did I learn? How will I be better? Where can I grow from it? So it doesn't mean that we don't even have that second of like, oh, but it more importantly, it's how quick we dust it off and move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like we said before, you still have to label the emotions. You still have to have them. You still have to process them. But doing that for too long, which everybody's too long is different, right? There's also too short. You can like just blow past things and be like, don't do that. But there's a happy medium of processing something and dealing with it. And each different thing, like Katie said, if it's a different altitude or if it's something that's a little bit more severe, like that's going to take longer to process than something that's not. But overall, trying to be able to keep the past in the past and let it be. Why did you do that for? Oh, sorry, went all the way back. Okay. The next step for creating a growth mindset is really to focus on what you can control and let go of worry. So this is one of my favorite graphics. Katie and I use it all the time in one of our trainings. And it's because so often we get so spun up on everything that's going on, usually not in our control. If you ever are just like, okay, I need to figure out what to do next because this is just something that's stressing me out or whatever, make a list of the things that you can actually control. And 9 times out of 10, the thing that you're stressing about is not in your control. So, things that are outside of your control, what other people believe, what other people think, other people's actions, the weather, other people's timing, other feelings, how people react to what you have to say, how your parents raised you, still not in your control. Time passing, what others post online. It's a great one that we let spin up in our head frequently. But really what you can control, and this is why, for us with Catalyst, our first session is lead. Who are you as a leader? Because if you don't know what your values are, what you want to do, the goals that you have, this is where you can really start to get ripped around and your mindset can be everywhere and anywhere because you don't know your core. So focusing on your locus of control, and this is not easy. Again, none of this is easy. It's all things that can be very trying. But if that means that sometimes you need to post this graphic someplace where you can see it and visualize it so that okay, wait, I just need to come back. What's in my control? What is not? Deal with it. It's something that I've had to do quite frequently. All right. The next step to a growth mindset is stopping the drain. So this is how you really start to edit your mindset. And in this case, the drain is the negativity that is around us in the world. There are many things that I don't do. Somebody the other day said something to me about mandates, and I was like, what? And it's because I don't watch the news. Like, I can't tell you the last time I have looked at it, seen it. My social media content doesn't have any news in it. And the unfortunate thing about the news, there's some good stuff on the news, don't get me wrong, but most of it is there to be kind of clickbait, to keep you engaged, to keep you worried, to keep you stressed, so that you come back to them as your source of whatever that is. So making sure that you're really thinking about the things that drain you, and editing those things out so that you no longer have that as an external source of negativity. That growth mindset can really be hindered by the negativity that is around you. And that sometimes can mean people in your life. We all have family members or friends that maybe we have that are continually negative and just bring negative energy, whether that be in gossip or, in news or just in mood. And as hard as it is, because I'm one of those people, I just want to help everybody. You can't. And you can help them for a little while. You can try, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And at some point you have to take your own drink. And so I put down here to really become selfish, because becoming the best version of you requires the space for growth. And if you're holding on to so many things, we only have so much capacity, right? We can't try to take on 1,000 things at once. And if that means that you need to take a break from a friend for a little while, or you need to, edit a habit that you used to have. And that even really goes to like some good habits. Sometimes we just like need to pause and add in something different, to be able to change our life. And then we can go back to a habit that maybe brings us some positivity as well. The next one is to ask the right questions. So this is something that can be a little tricky, because if you don't know how to ask the right questions, if you've never been taught how to ask the right questions, it's a little messy. But when you look at the difference between how can I feel happier today versus how can I not mess this up, that's a loaded question. If you're asking questions that are already going to lead your brain to negativity, you're probably likely to get negativity. And there's a lot of different questions that you can ask yourself. Things like, what can I achieve right now? What can I do to move me one more step forward? What can I say to myself that will make me feel encouraged? And it's really just the slight reframing of completely taking negativity out. And I had a coach of mine who he would make us do 25 push-ups every time we said the word can't. I don't say can't much anymore, let me tell you. But it's really kind of one of those things that we're all the dogs from like Maslow. Is that Maslow, Emma? I can't remember, who did like the trainings of our brains. If you teach us how to get food or a reward that's a dopamine reward, we'll do it. If you shock me because I said something I wasn't supposed to say, I'll stop saying that. And
That was
so
Pavlov.
Pavlov, that's right. Yeah. It'll really, help you to kind of edit your brain. And so I've known people who, when they said the word can't, they would wear like a rubber band on their wrist and would snap the rubber band just a little bit, just enough to be like, ooh, that didn't feel good. Or, have to put, that's where like cuss jars came from, where you like have to put 25 cents in because you said a cuss word if you're trying to not do that anymore. And so just really kind of focusing on how you can change your language to make sure that you're asking the right questions and helping your growth mindset. Okay, so this is one of the bigger pieces, is enjoying the ride. And this is something that I know a lot of us can struggle with. I'm a very much goal-oriented person. We just put out our podcast yesterday for our assessment junkies, and literally every assessment that I've ever taken has called me an achiever. I love goals. I also really love goals that I can like almost get to, but I don't, because I go over it and I've already moved the bar before I even get there because I want the next big thing. But one of the books that I really truly love is called Winning by Tim Grover, and I put it on the end here. But he really just talks about how a lot of athletes have this problem. And one of the things that they do is, if you go back and watch like Super Bowl winning moments, or when they just won whatever trophy or whatever, they don't even enjoy it. They don't even take a moment to say like, man, I did this. I'm so proud of myself. And what they'll do is they'll be like, okay, we're on to the next. And it's literally just like, oh, no. Okay. So you've got to be able to give yourself that moments of engagement with yourself to say like, I did this. I'm proud of myself. I'm here right now. This has been a fun ride. When I talk about fitness with friends, one of the things is they're always looking for, this next goal for weight loss, or the next, big PR or whatever that is. And you've really got to, with something that's like an infinite game where it never really ends, which health is an infinite game, you have to be in the moment and be like, man, this is cool. I enjoy this. I'm pushing myself. I'm doing something that's hard. I'm making sure that, you know, my brain is never just moving on to the next thing. And one way to really do that is to engage your senses. So being present is one of my favorite things, and I am a nature junkie at heart. And so one of the best things that I love to do is going outside and just standing in the sunshine and literally just, I mean, we've all done it where you just turn yourself into a sunflower and you just like stand there like this. And you just like think about, how does the sun feel on my face right now? What does the wind feel like? What do I smell? What do I hear? And really engaging your senses is a great way to bring you back to the present moment, to where you are. And meditation is this, but I do walking meditations a lot. So I can talk to myself about, how does my foot feel when it hits the ground? How does my leg feel when the muscles actually contract? How does it feel to pause and look at a sunset, and really just kind of connecting with what's going on around you? And there's always another goal around the corner. There's always going to be something else. And so I really love this Michael Jordan quote where he says, I failed over and over and over, and that's why I succeed. Because he learns from each of those present moments until he does succeed. Okay, so we're going to go into another version. Those are all growth mindset pieces that we have talked about. Sometimes we are not ready for a growth mindset. Sometimes what we need is to transition from a negative mindset into a more neutral mindset. Katie and I have read this book, and I think Emma might have read it too, it's called It Takes What It Takes. And it's at the end of the slides here too, so you don't have to remember it or anything. But Trevor Moawad is the guy who wrote it, and he was known as ESPN's best brain trainer. So he works with high performance athletes all day long and trains them to be in the present moment, to think about what's happening now, and to remain neutral instead of positive. And so one of his biggest clients is Russell Wilson. And one of the things that they talk about is, if you are a quarterback and you throw an interception, you can spiral into a very large, messy drain. And, you know, that was never more apparent than when we watched the Kansas City Chiefs home opener, and L'Jarius Toney literally had butter hands because he was in his head, and you could see it. Every time he would go for a pass, it was like he wasn't connecting to what he was doing because he was thinking about the last time he dropped the ball. So being neutral for him is really just talking about, okay, what do I do right this second? What actions do I need to take? And we're going to go through a neutral mindset kind of overview. That's kind of an adaptation of the book. But this factor here is mind-blowing to me. It's one of those stats that I'm like, oh my gosh. So the human mind absorbs negativity 7 times more easily than it absorbs positivity. Again, this is what Emma was saying, where we are made to stay alive. Negativity is typically what kills us. So our brain registers negative things more intensely than positive. And we also know that language is the most powerful carrier of negativity. Thinking about my struggles is nowhere near as powerful as verbalizing them. When it comes out of my mouth, it affects me 10-fold. So you're talking about potentially 70 times more intense if you are thinking negatively and saying it out loud. So if you're, you know, even if you hear your kids say something like, God, I'm so stupid, stop that. Don't do that. That's not okay. We're not, you know, and making sure that they kind of just try to stay neutral. So.
Yeah. And you know, the interesting thing here too is so often, and we talked about this when we talked about confidence and talked about imposter syndrome, it's the negative things that we remember. Like, I can still tell you that negative thing that was said to me about public speaking when I was 20 years old. But I can't tell you the positive things that were said about that day when I was 20. And so, you know, that verbal piece is so powerful.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, I tell people all the time, like, especially in like weightlifting or things like that, you'll hear people say stuff out loud like lightweight. And if you're ever in a gym where they're lifting heavy, and it's because what they're doing is they're making their brain hear it. And I'll say to somebody when I hear them say something negative, like, we don't say that out loud. Your brain hears you. And the kids that I go to the gym with are always like, wait, what? And I'm like, your brain hears everything you say out loud, even more. Yes, it's in your head already, but the more you verbalize it, the more you're likely to have it come true. It's the same thing as like, oh, I bought a yellow bug and now I see 7,000 yellow bugs everywhere. It's because your brain now has it at the front of your brain and it's noticing it more. So if you say like, oh, don't trip, well, then you're going to trip. Instead, if you say like, be graceful, you will be graceful. It's a quick flip on the play in words in your head and when they come out of your mouth.
And this is also why, especially when I'm on mentor rounds with women on the golf course and we're like right next to water, like we will see this all the time. If you pay attention, I can tell when people are like, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the, don't. First thing they do is hit it in the water. So I always tell people, take a deep breath and say to yourself and say it out loud, I am going to hit it over this water. I am going to clear the water. And more often than not, I see it time and time and time again. When we say it, when we verbalize it, we will clear that water. But if we say to ourselves, don't do it, immediately the next thing we do is right in that water.
Going in the water.
Mhm.
So this is a breakdown of It Takes What It Takes. I told Katie, it has been probably 3.5, 4 years since I read It Takes What It Takes. And so I had to go back and kind of look at an overview just to kind of refresh my mind. So this is kind of an overview of each of the chapters. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through, and a lot of this we've already talked about, but breaking it down in a neutral sense is where it really becomes helpful. So the first chapter, he really talks about identifying your emotions, labeling them, reframing them, and then repeating it to yourself. Same thing we've been saying here for, the last 10, 15 minutes. Setting specific goals and then breaking down tasks into smaller steps and creating a timeline and having an accountability so that you can adjust plans as needed. So this is really when you start seeing the tasks broken down, there's no emotion in that. It is just, what do I need to do next? And making sure that you already have that laid out before you're in the emotional part of it. Russell Wilson, for example, will come over after a play that's either good or bad, because if you get too excited, you can kind of spin yourself up into like, I'm so amazing, this is great. And then you end up, doing something a little bit too much. And so really just saying like, okay, to throw a pass, I need to step back, take the ball, step back, put my arm in the air. Like it's literal step-by-step pieces.
Yeah. And what I love about the book was he was, so unfortunately Trevor Moab has passed, but he was Russell Wilson. I know when we talk about Russell Wilson now, we're like, yeah, back when Russell Wilson was really good. So like when they won the Super Bowl is they tell the stories in the book, and it's like Russell Wilson immediately threw an interception at the beginning of the game. And it was like coming back and not getting too high or too low, walking back through, recognizing. And what I love about adjusting the plan. Okay, you had a plan that you were going to complete that pass, but there was an offsides penalty. And so now you're first, first and 25 as opposed to first and 10. What do you do? How do you adjust? On the golf course, I had a plan to just pipe it right down the middle. It did not work. I am now shanked off to the right. Now what do I do? How do I adjust my plan and keep myself neutral? Same in business. I had a plan. I was going to walk in here. I was going to knock out this meeting. I was going to sign this business. We are going to knock it out of the park. And then the reaction is, not yet. So I could tell myself we failed, or I can tell myself not yet. We will continue this relationship. We will build this relationship. The time will come. It's just not now. And so how do we shift our mindset to not get too high when we do pipe it right down the middle, or when we do make that touchdown? Because if you come out the next series and you're all hyped up because you just scored a touchdown, you're going to be sailing it over everyone's head, and then you're going to get an interception. So how do you keep those emotions in check till the end?
Well,
Yeah.
also the fall is farther. If you're on that high and you make even a little flub the next round, the fall is so far because you just your mindset was too, like, you were too amped, and then you can easily spiral again because, oh well, I guess that was just luck, or whatever.
Yeah. I like to think of this as a mindset as like the pendulum, right? Like what we want is to be kind of dead center where it barely moves and we're very consistent and everything kind of works, versus if you are one side, you've got to swing back down. Like there's no way you can stay all the way up here. So you literally just have to try to stay in the middle. Making hard choices. So prioritizing goals and committing to action. That's one thing that he really kind of harps on, is making sure that you have your priorities straight, you know what your goal is, so that you know exactly what tasks you need to do to get that goal done. Taking responsibility for language and making a conscious effort to use positive language. And repetition and consistency is required to train our brains to think positively. So this is not something that happens overnight. This is where like affirmations have really become very popular. Like if you are somebody who is having a hard time with how you think in a more positive or a growth mindset kind of a scenario, start talking to yourself in affirmations. I did affirmations for probably 3.5 years every morning. And just and I had them on my phone. I read the same thing every time. But I will tell you with like affirmations and thinking that way, saying them in a way that is meaningful makes a big difference than just like, I'm going to read these. Yep, this is it. Yeah, okay. Like you have to mean it. And when you mean it, your brain hears it.
Yeah. And it's so powerful and it feels unnatural at first. Like I have the affirmations as well. And even the visualization to go with the affirmations is really powerful. I don't know that I mentioned this. We're lucky Abby, my daughter, has jumped on. And we do something. I know she rolls her eyes at me sometimes, but the 4 F's on the golf course, and it's like focus, fairway, I forget the other one. And then it's like F it, like just let it go. And it's those 4 F's. And it doesn't seem natural at first, but I even do it when I play golf because it's one of those things where if I don't say it, then I'm going to go in and, golf is hard and it's a challenge and blah, blah. And so, what do we say to ourselves and how do we say it? And how do we keep reaffirming, how hard we're working?
Yeah. And then I love the next one. You talk about visualizing not just success, but the specific actions that it takes. And so like, this is one of my favorite things. We do this icebreaker sometimes in groups where somebody will say to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, like right out the steps. And then when you get somebody to actually do it, it's like, oh, they didn't say to open the peanut butter, or they didn't say to get a knife, or they didn't say to take the twist tie off the bread, or, all those little things that go in the middle. So really breaking it down into specific actions so that your brain can understand what you're doing. This is muscle memory, right? So if there's something that you're worried about failing on, like with Trevor Moawad would be, you've really got to think about every single little step that it takes and then see that step going right. Not just like, hey, I'm in the end zone and I won or whatever, but it's oh, I threw this pass correctly. It came off my hand right. I stepped back correctly. All the little things that go into whatever we're doing day to day to make sure that our brain is there. And then I also love he kind of talks about mental contrasting, which is visualizing not just the actions that it takes for the success, but the obstacles that you're going to have to overcome to achieve that. And so, if we're talking about golf course, maybe there is some kind of water hazard, or maybe there is wind or rain, or, whatever is out there that might get in our way. And this is also a really great way to be able to think agile and be able to say like, hey, these are all of the pieces that might get in my way, and here's how I'll overcome them. And so I really love that mental contrasting to be able to say like, hey, not only am I going to show you how I'm going to succeed, but brain, I've already showed you how to beat the obstacles that might be there. So the last kind of follow up to the neutral mindset, identifying your strengths and weaknesses, making sure that, you can focus on the things that you need to get better at. Again, this is not judgment. This is noticing. So these are the places where for Trevor Moawad, he might say, hey, Russell, you really struggle with a pass that's over 20 yards. Let's practice that over and over again so that you get better at it, so that you can say, I'm now better at it, instead of saying, I'm not good at these yet. The more you practice, the more you can identify those things. And again, he talks about mindfulness and meditation for building self-awareness and developing that mental toughness. Because if you can keep yourself from being too high or too low, you'll be more able to think clearly and calmly to be able to work through a process. Pressure is often self-imposed, and we can reframe pressure to help us. So one of the best things about reframing this is when you think about stress, when somebody thinks about public speaking, for example, if you go up there and you're like, oh my God, I'm so nervous, I think I'm going to throw up. This is not good. I feel like if you have these negative connotations around emotion, when you go to do something, it can really just, it gets to the pit of your stomach, right? But if you go out there and you say to yourself, like, I'm nervous because this feels exciting. And there's a study where they talked to people and they had them explain what being nervous and what feeling excited was. They are literally the same emotion, right? But we frame them differently. Nervous is typically a negative emotion. Excited is a positive emotion. But when you compare the descriptions that people had of them, the feeling in your stomach, the butterflies, the this, the that, they're the exact same. So if there's a time where you're kind of living in that negativity and you're really kind of feeling that mindset is a little bit ugly, take it and try to flip it and figure out why it's important to you, what's making you feel that way. And, things like, I get to do this is a really great way to reframe that. You also want to create that culture of excellence where you have people around you who understand what you're after, and have the positive role models and, mentors that can help you develop that. Somebody that you look up to, like we talked about earlier, of somebody you think really has it together, who has a positive mindset, who has walked through everything, and you value the way that they talk to themselves, think, and move throughout life when it comes to mindset. So that is really all of the stuff that I have for mindset. I just threw a ton of information at you, but these are all the books. Some of these are repeats from the first session we did. I put both It Takes What It Takes and Getting to Neutral in there. I've also added in Winning by Tim Grover and Relentless. Those are a little bit more sports bound books, but Tim Grover is the trainer who trained Michael Jordan. He also trains like Dwayne Wade. He is a guru when it comes to creating champions, and you cannot talk about champions without talking about mindset. So love those books. They're easy reads. And if you have any interest in like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, they are fascinating.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna. That is I've heard you talk about mindset for 3+ years, and every time I learn something new. So I appreciate it. Any thoughts, questions from anybody? All
I
right.
just want to say that having a fixed mindset is something that if you would have asked me back when I had a really fixed mindset, just a few years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said, oh, of course I have a growth mindset. I love to learn. I love, doing new things. But when I actually learned about mindset, I realized, oh my gosh, I do have a fixed mindset. And oftentimes the people who do are the people who have been told their whole life, you're so smart. You're so good at this. And I was really good in school. And that's what my teachers told me from the time I was in kindergarten. You're so smart. And because they said that, I thought in my head, some people are smart and some people it's just harder for naturally. And because of that, whenever later in life I encountered challenges, I was like, oh, I must not be good at this. So I'm just going to give up. I'm going to only do the things I'm good at. When I finally came to that realization, my whole life changed because I realized, oh, I should actually work on things and get better at things. I don't just have to do the things I'm naturally good at.
Yeah. If there is any of those books on that list that I say when you're talking about mindset to read, I think Carol Dweck's book is first.
Yes.
Because it is the foundation for all of this. And she thoroughly goes through and says, and she shows you in many different areas of life, whether it's relationships, work, kids, like all the things. She shows you exactly how our mindset has been created. And it is a absolutely earth-shattering type of book because Emma's right. I was just saying, people were like, you're so smart. This is so easy for you. And I'm like, yes. And as much as like I would like to think I didn't just internalize it, you're telling me I'm special, which feels great. But then when I don't feel that special, it doesn't feel good. So I'm going to stop doing it. And I think I talked about the data last time. It's the data behind telling kids, especially, that they're special or they're gifted instead of they worked hard and they came over something, is absolutely mind blowing.
It's definitely changed the way I talk to kids because when you tell them, oh, you're so smart, they take it differently than if you tell them, oh my gosh, I can tell you worked really hard on this.
Yeah.
Both Shelley and Tracy unmuted themselves. So Shelley, did you have something?
I just am very, I'm not very good with mindset. Um, I have a hard time with change and negative self-talk. So the talking out loud part is really important.
Yeah.
If I'm spiraling, I have found that saying things out loud like, no, you are thinking the wrong way. You are good. People do like you. And gosh darn it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's so important. And Shelley, I don't know if you were able to be here for the confidence and imposter syndrome or if you listened to it, but I especially tell women, like, name the voice in your head. Mine is Sasha. And so when Sasha starts her negative talk, I'll be like, shut up, Sasha. We don't need this. Because and I say this to women all the time, like, we say things to ourselves that we would never say to our friends. And so we've got to get that voice out of our head. So yeah, I love that you're like, no, I'm not going to allow you to talk to yourself like that. Um, it's so important.
And it does, it stops the whole train of thought. And sometimes I have to say things a lot longer.
Yeah.
But it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and you never know, and this may be for you, but this might be, people in general, you never know what you were told when you were younger and how, your brain is really formed. And so it's going to take some people, it'll be no problem. Let me, do some affirmations and I've got this, versus some people really have to work at it, and it takes time, and it takes time for our brain. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's not going to come down in a day either. And it really just takes a lot of time to continually and consistently keep at this, because eventually your brain will catch up. It just takes really hitting the repetitions over and over.
Yeah. Tracy, what's your thoughts?
I was just thinking that 7 times more likely to absorb that negativity. If you've ever been next to me at golf and when we're swinging, you'll hear me like, I'll be like, nope, well, that was dumb. Like every single shot I have a comment on, and it's like a lot of times there's expletives in it, but it's you know. So now I'm like, okay, now how do I flip that and not sound like a crazy person? Haven't given myself a pep talk after every single one. So that was kind of a helpful for me to think about, specifically around golf. And then also I had this experience recently. I did a new workout I'd never done before, and I was struggling through it, and it was a virtual trainer, and the trainer just said, smile. I want you to smile right now and remind yourself why you're here. And just the physical act of smiling in the middle of this workout changed my entire, like, everything. Like, I felt lighter. I've got, better at what I was doing in that moment. And it was the weirdest. I walked out of there going, I guess I should smile more, like make my, when I'm in the hurt locker, smile. Maybe smiling will do the thing, do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hate the phrase fake it till you make it. We've switched to learn it till you earn it. But it's, even that confidence as you're learning it, can really help. Like that body language. When I speak, sorry, Abby, you're going to give me a hard time, but you've seen this graphic. There's a graphic of Abby and you can see her body language as she's putting. It's 3 pictures and it's her like willing the ball into the hole. And it's true, like our body language, we will see young women walk up to the golf course for these, high school and college golf tournaments. And I mean, they look like they're about to run through a wall, destroy it all, and we see that in business too, where, when people walk in with this confidence, whether it's real or whether they're practicing it, we just naturally do better and are better when we have that confidence. And so how do we, learn it till we earn it? And how do we, either fake our body out or, fake our brain out until we fully get there?
There's a lot of research behind it. I mean, the power posing, it works.
Yeah.
Like it literally works. Power posing works. And Tracy, to your point, smiling works. I smile in the gym all the time. I always think I must look like a crazy person. People probably think I'm gonna like try out for cheerleading or something because I'm always smiling, but it really helps.
That's one of the really cool things about when you talk about a gym community, right? Because when you're in the middle of something and it's terrible, even if you can find like, you know, something to laugh at with the group, or if there's something else going on where it can still make you smile and you're not just by yourself, it really can make a big difference in making a lift easier. Or, you know, even when you're dying, right? Yesterday I was at the gym and there was a young boy who was pushing 300 pounds on a sled, and he was absolutely dying. Like he was like on the floor after every single time, just like death. And I walked over to him and I said, "Hey, you know why you're better than most people?" And he was like, "Why?" And I was like, "Because you're doing things that are hard that nobody else will do." And he just smiled. And I was like, that's what I thought. He got up, got to what he was doing, and went and powered through a workout. And I was like, it just takes that little bit of a mindset shift to remind yourself that, yes, you're dying. And yes, this is really hard, but you're doing it because you're after a goal. And so that smile, that little bit will really help.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Tracy, I love what you just put in chat, which is the,
Yeah.
yeah, I forget her name, but the,
Rebecca, I think it's her name in the show.
Oh,
Her power pose. I love that scene. And then Keely says something like, "My God, you're terrifying," or something like that. And it was like, yes. I actually did that before I had to go speak at our big auction this year because I was like freaking out. And I walked in the storage room and I did that. And I was like, I feel ridiculous, but it worked.
it worked.
yeah,
That is awesome.
I love it. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. And I know we've got a couple of these left, but then also little teaser. We are going to Melissa and Gretchen are going to be hosting a morning of learning. So it's going to be a couple hours at Hub. We're finalizing the details and the dates and everything on that, but it's going to be in person. And then it looks like next year we're going to be doing more in person development opportunities as well. So more to come on all of that. All right. Have a great day, ladies. See y'all on the golf course.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.